Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Trouble with Missy and Thor. And I'm just realizing I didn't check my hair before we started. Is your hair okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are back here, and it is getting dark earlier and earlier because I don't know why. Something to do with the seasons. I don't know.
Yes,
I guess it's because it's November and we're getting into the winter. So
because we're gradually going into the winter. So,
yeah, yeah. So we are here at Apollo Piano. They keep changing things around on us. Now they put these like three pictures behind us, and
but it looks great.
yeah, it looks good. It's pretty cool.
One thing I have to ask you, Thor,
Oh
is the
yes.
plant centered?
No! It's never centered. Oh, there you go. Oh, you're
There.
doing the honors this time. That looks
Oh
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
See.
That looks actually very
Yeah.
perfect. So anyway, we are so at Apollo Piano, in case you haven't heard, if you've been watching us, you hear us mention this every time. If you have some piano buying needs, or if you need a piano, or if you have piano tuning needs,
Or if
or
you'd like to rent a piano.
yes, piano renting needs, or if you need a piano repaired, or if you need a piano tuned. That's the other thing you can do here. So, or if you just happen to be driving down Mangrove Avenue and you need some direction in your life and you need somebody to talk to, you can just come in. So, do you
Yeah.
have anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah. Have some coffee, Thor. Um. Yes. Well. Yeah. This is a great facility. Wonderful staff, and the studios are just gorgeous. So
Yes.
stop on by for lessons or instruments. It's just a great place to be. And Vince Chambers, the owner, is a great a great person and a really good musician himself. So
Yeah.
stop on by. But anyway, so what
Yeah.
are we going to be talking about this evening, Thor?
Well, we kind of decided this. What was it? 2 days ago, we just
Yes.
decided on the topic. So today it's going to be. It has to do with performing, and it has to do with what you do if you make a mistake during a performance. So I thought this was a really good thing because it could be relevant to a lot of people out there, especially musicians. And
Absolutely. And there's also some tips that Thor and I can share with you that can help you prevent mistakes
yeah,
in the future. So,
yeah, and there's quite a few components to this because sometimes it has to do with nerves, and people get nervous, they make more mistakes. I am like the epitome of that, if believe it or not. No, people it surprises people. Why do you get nervous? I don't know. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. So I don't know if you have like a pre-planned thing in
oh
your head.
yeah, I
Okay, good.
do.
I
I
figured you
do.
would. Yeah.
I do.
Do you want to start, or do you want me to start? How do you
Uh,
want to do this?
it doesn't matter. We can just go back and forth. I
Okay.
can start maybe just a
Yeah.
few things.
Let's hear what you have.
Okay, so there, Thor and I both have we have personal experiences in which we have experienced ourselves as musicians um, throughout the process, and it's just trial and error basically. But the things that we're going to share with you this evening, hope that they'll not only prevent you from um, mistakes in future performances, but will also help encourage you to want to go out there and perform. So here we go. So my first mistake, I mean biggest mistake in performing at all, and I've shared this with many of my students because a lot of especially beginner students struggle with this type of I I think it's a habit, that you form, especially if you're playing alone by yourself a lot. And I notice my students, they usually will develop this habit usually when we have a break, whether it's, during the summer or during a winter break or something like that. So in 8th grade, I had a performance and it was in front of my school at the time. It was a talent show down in the Bay Area. And at the time, I was mastering Mozart's Rondo alla Turca. And so, anyways, I had learned the piece, and my teacher had warned me over and over and over again to play the song slower, that playing the song fast would cause me to make many mistakes. And I mean fast is faster. I tell my students this: the perfect tempo is a tempo with no mistakes in it. Okay. So she told me to slow the song down. And I did not listen to her. And there was a um, a boy in my school at that time I had a
Oh,
very big crush on, and so I decided as an eighth grader I wanted to impress this boy and play the song really, 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 really fast. And in my mind, and in a lot of younger students' mind, the I think the thought process is this: the faster I play it, the better it sounds, and that's not always the case. But
well, I
you
don't know.
know,
I think guys are like, man, look how fast she can play that Mozart piece. Woo!
I
Yeah.
was well, I was very, I was young at the time and not a mature pianist, and so I decided to go out there and play the song, and I ended up crucifying it, and I think it was one of the worst performances of my life, career, whatever you want to call it. And I remember my mom saying, like, she said that she was embarrassed, and
Oh,
quite frankly,
jeez.
I was embarrassed too, because I think in many cases, their expectations were higher from me, because I usually performed well in front of audiences, because I had been performing since I was in second grade in front of large crowds, because I was brought up in a church, and I performed in front of the church congregation many times ever since I was very little. So, anyways, make a long story short, this is my tip from that experience. My tip is this: whenever you're going to perform, you always want to practice the song slower. Okay, remember a perfect tempo is a tempo with no mistakes in it. So you want to practice slower. You also want to play it slower. And this is why, Thor.
Mm.
When you go and play in front of an audience, you are automatically, as a musician, in most cases, going to speed the song
Yeah,
up,
absolutely.
because your adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah. And you don't even realize it either,
You don't. So that's
And
why I would tell my students, you want to practice that song
mm,
about 10, 10, well, on the metronome. You want to go like, so if you normally would play it at 100, you want to practice
at
that at
90.
90,
Yeah.
because when you play it, you're going to play it quicker. So you always want to really, really be careful and make sure that you're practicing the song very carefully, that you're avoiding mistakes. And then sometimes you could cut the time actually in half only when you're practicing, like especially in the very beginning. So if the song is at, let's say, a 120, you could cut that time in half on the metronome.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and, it's I can't tell you how many times I've done this where I've, uh, done a performance and I played something and I felt like it went okay, like, well, I didn't make any mistakes and it felt like it went okay,
Yeah.
and then I see the recording of myself performing, and when you see it outside of yourself, like, when you
Yes,
see a recording of yourself, like, on a video or whatever, then I was like, "Wow, I'm playing fast. Geez, like,
exactly.
slow down, dude."
Hmm.
And, it's funny because you don't realize you're doing this while you're
You
performing
don't.
because like she said that the adrenaline kicks in and you're just thinking about like don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, and you're playing it at 240 beats per minute when it's supposed to be 120. It's
Yes.
kind of exaggeration, but it's yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and
It's
always, like Thor said, like he had mentioned, it's always good to record yourself.
mhm.
Because I mean, I do that a lot. I
Yeah.
record myself, and like you said, you play it back, and I was like, ooh, but then that gives you time to perfect what you are disliking in your recording.
Yeah, yeah, and also if you do record yourself, like you play a song and you record yourself, what you'll discover is that there are certain song or certain parts of the song that you're playing too fast that you didn't realize you were playing fast. You know what I mean? Like especially the parts that are easy to play. Have you done this?
Oh yeah,
Like
it's
that?
well, like with like I said, with in another podcast, usually the first page is hunky dory. You get to that second part where you
Mhm.
haven't put as much practice, because everybody likes
Yeah.
to start at the beginning of the piece because it's easy and we played a lot and everybody knows it, right? And then you get to the end of
Yeah.
the second part, and then you tank because
Yeah. Yeah.
it
And
gets
there's
worse and worse.
and now I'm gonna bore you with some violin talk
Go.
because because a certain friend of ours, Mindy, we'll just call her Mindy because
She said we can mention her
she
name.
said we can mention her name.
Woohoo!
So I'm putting it in quotes because maybe it's Mandy. You don't know. Anyway, a mutual friend of ours that may or may not be named Mindy, is told me to she told me to learn this piece. I think it was one of the Bach pieces that she's having me learn because I take lessons from her on the violin. And what I realized was that I was able to play through a pretty big chunk of the piece But there are different. There's a thing in violin called positions, which means that you change the position of your left hand. Whoops! I just bumped my elbow into the table.
It's okay. Just knock the table over.
Just knock the plant over.
Just knock
Like,
it over.
just knock it over. So, so on the violin, like when you play in first position, it's very easy. First position means you have your hand pretty close to the thingamajig on the end of the violin neck or whatever you call it. That's the technical term. And that's an easy position to play. Once you slide into third position or fourth position or fifth position, it gets a lot harder because the margin of error is a greater, and you can mess up easier. So there's a part in the song that's played in first position that's very easy, and this is like on the second page of the piece or whatever. So guess which part of the piece I played very fast? Is that
Oh,
very
are you
easy?
talking about the song? It was Bach, right? It was a Twinkle
It was
Twinkle.
no, it wasn't Twinkle Twinkle. I'm not going to play till
Give
next
him a
month.
hard
I'm not going
time.
to play that till next year when I get better.
But
So.
that the hardest, the part that you had sped up was the part where you were in first position,
Yes,
correct?
because that was the easy part to play. So I was playing it. I don't know what I was playing, maybe 100 beats per minute or something. And I was playing through the piece, and I was doing
It was
great.
Twinkle Twinkle.
It was not Twinkle Twinkle. Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is way too advanced for me to play on any instrument, even the piano. So naturally, but anyway,
Mindy, we hope you're watching.
she is. No, she's listening. She does this while she's anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah.
In
So
first position.
yeah, the point is that if you play a song, the parts that are easy, you're going to tend to rush through it and play it very quickly. My students do the same thing, and I'm sure your students do that also.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
And so that's why it's important to record yourself. So going back to this thing, like how do you avoid making mistakes? Record yourself. You have a device. You have your phone. You have what do I have here? Look at this. Is you have one of these, right? So use this. Record yourself. And why do I have this
Even
here?
if you have something what is called an iPod
Yeah.
or even maybe one of those MP3 players.
Yeah. Just record.
Yeah.
No one's going to listen to it except you, right? You're just recording yourself practicing. Use your phone, or if you have a camcorder. I mean, what are you from the '90s? Maybe you have one of those.
Maybe you are.
But just record
I
yourself.
love the 90s.
Yeah, and then just record yourself and listen to yourself play, and then you will hear stuff that you wouldn't catch while you were playing it. And that this is guaranteed. Every musician will tell you this. So
That's true.
yeah.
That's very good advice.
So that's really this is very good. These are very good tips. Anything else? Because I have a whole slew of
Oh, me
things
too.
in my
So there's always the part of the song where we're like anticipating, and I mean anticipating to make mistakes. Usually there's, you go into maybe it usually comes in maybe the middle part of a piece, and it comes in with a challenging phrase or phrases. And I always tell my students to practice those. Like it's really easy to start from the beginning and play all the way through, but it's it's good to compartmentize a piece and to practice the parts that are the most difficult passages, because if you do that, and I tell them like go back and practice those 10 times each before you play through the entire song. And I tell them that part isn't going to get any better if you don't pay extra attention to those parts. So it's really important if you have difficult passages in a piece to, like I said, pay special attention to it, practice them through more diligently, and then practice all the way from the beginning to the end. The ending is usually the part where the audience members, like the spectators, remember the most. So you're going to want to practice your ending quite a few times too, because like I said, that's like the last impression you're leaving to your
It's
audience.
the last thing they hear.
That's the
So
last thing
yeah.
they hear. So, you could play really well all the way through. If you mess up at the ending, it's like
Yeah.
it's like you never
It'll
did.
stick. It'll
It will
yeah.
stick,
It'll stick.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. So I mean, so here's some other ones if I
Go
can
for
add
it.
to it. And you can just
Do
add
you
to this
have
if
any
you.
mistakes? Like, well,
I never
besides,
make mistakes. I'm perfect.
but I mean, there was that you talked about like that one Bach piece recorded at home, but I want to hear about like the
Piano mistakes?
performance. I want like
Oh, you
I
want stories?
I want a story.
Like falling off the bench during a performance or something? I've never done that.
Anything
Okay.
really, like
Well, yeah,
like
I
my
guess
eighth grade experience.
you're like your oh yeah, the crush you had. So did you guys get married? You didn't finish the story about the romance. You can't just leave us
There was
hanging.
no, it didn't end up happening.
Oh,
I think I really
you should have played slower. So
yeah, no, something could have happened if I played slower.
you never
So
see what
there
could have
you
been. You
go.
never
See,
know.
it
That's
could
your
affect
lesson.
your entire future.
Watch your tempo, and you could be happily married.
Okay,
Okay.
let's talk
Okay.
about you. But what were you gonna say?
Oh, so
What
what?
advice do you
Yeah.
have?
So here's my advice because I want to talk about this thing called muscle memory. Okay, and I mentioned this I think during the first or second podcast, and this is really important. This is your secret weapon, ladies and gentlemen. This is like your battle axe that's never gonna do you wrong, right? That's a weird metaphor, but anyway. So what you do, so muscle memory means that if you do something enough times, you can't mess up. Okay, it's just in your muscle memory over and over. So um, there are a lot of different comparisons you can make, and one of them is that you could apply that same principle to sports. So let's say that you want to become really good at playing basketball. Okay, you're young, you're healthy, you're fit, so you want to get into basketball. You just want to get good at it, right? So that's a pretty normal thing, especially for a kid. So how do you get good at basketball? Well, you practice. You have to get in kind of good shape because there's some running involved. But instead of focusing on the running, what I would be focusing on is like, how do you throw the ball? So there's certain things that you do when you throw a ball. So for example, apparently, because I'm not a basketball player, but apparently, yeah, I'm definitely not. um, so when you throw the ball, you're supposed to do certain things like have your wrist a certain way, and you're supposed to let the ball roll off the tips of your fingers, right? Things like that, so that there's a certain spin. There are certain things that you're supposed to learn and get into your muscle memory when you throw the basketball into the hoop. So you do that enough times, you're going to get more shots into the hoop. Okay, so that you practice and you practice and you practice. So when you first start out, you only get like maybe 1 out of 10 shots because you're not very good at it. You've never played basketball before, right? But then you keep practicing and you keep practicing and you get some coaching from a coach or something. Or Melissa here, who's probably played before. Maybe she can teach you. I don't know. Um, but then after a few weeks, you get 3 or 4 out of 10 shots in the hoop because you're getting better at it. Then after a few months, maybe you get like 7 or 8. And after a few years, you're like Michael Jordan, you get everyone in the hoop that you just never miss, right? So that's an example of muscle memory. You do a certain thing with your hand and you do this over and over. I mean, this is really boring. Um, but you do that same motion with your wrist and with your fingers, and that gets into your muscle memory, and that makes you more successful as a basketball player. The same is true with a piano, and the same is true with every instrument you could possibly learn, whether it's guitar, flute, trumpet, what are some others? Violin,
Yes.
cello, anything, doesn't matter. Same is true with ballet, dancing, any kind of those arts that involve any kind of movement, whether it's the big muscles or the small muscles. Muscle memory is your secret weapon. You do it enough times, you just can't mess up. Okay. So
Yes.
do you want to, yeah,
Well,
add to
I
that?
mean, I can kind of make this relatable. Like we're talking about sports and whether you want to think cheerleading a sport, it is. But
So oddly, I never got into that.
what?
I never got into cheerleading.
Well, I don't know. We'll
You
talk
can't see
about that on another
you
podcast.
can't see me as a cheerleader. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I
All right.
probably could. But oh gosh. Anyways,
That's frightening. Okay.
yes,
Go ahead.
you want to comment as Thor as a cheerleader, go right on ahead.
Hashtag.
Um, but what I was saying is usually in cheerleading, like in competitive cheerleading, there's so much practice that's involved, and it goes back to like muscle memory too. When we're putting together routines, especially if you watch some of those Netflix cheerleading shows, you'll notice they'll have to do so many what is called full outs in order to get it right. So one of the best cheerleading squads in our country, um, they're from Texas, and they talk about doing so many full outs all in a row. So their muscle memory, same thing with tumbling. I know I had a child in gymnastics, and it all comes to muscle memory too. So having said that, it's you have to take the same thing, and I think Thor is kind of I'm kind of reiterating what he said in a former podcast is that you have to practice so many times and so many hours in order to get really good in most cases because this kind of covers a couple of our podcasts and
Mhm.
what we've done. But if you remember our special guest speaker last week, Nolan Shahid, I mean, do you remember him talking about practicing for like 8 hours in
Yes.
one day? I mean,
Yes.
that's insane.
Yeah.
But that's why he's as good as he is,
Exactly. Yeah.
because he has put in time
Mm.
into his art.
Tim. Oh, time.
Time.
Sorry, I can
I
spell.
thought you were an English
That
teacher.
doesn't mean I know how to spell. I was like, isn't
Anyways,
it TMI? Oh, TIM.
time.
Okay.
So if you put your time into your art, you will get better. And especially if you have a good coach or teacher um, working with you,
Mhm.
it's just going to help refine what you already have.
It reminds me of actually somebody in my family plays golf, and he was telling me that Tiger Woods, the famous golfer,
Hmm.
the amount of practice he puts in a day golfing, it's
Yes,
like just beyond
it's like a
be
work day.
it's beyond bewildering. Like he spends
Yes,
the morning hitting um like knocking like 100 different balls into the what do you call it, it's like the driving range where you practice.
he doesn't
I
play
don't
golf
know.
either.
Well, actually, I do, but I'm not very good at it. My dad drags me on the golf course and makes me play. So,
He drags you. Get over here,
yeah,
Thor.
yeah. But Tiger Woods, I'm just using this as an example because
Mhm.
he's a very, very good golfer. He's very
Then we'll talk
successful.
about Yanni.
No, he won't. Speaking of success,
Yes.
but yeah. No, so Tiger Woods is very, very successful and very good at what he does. Why is that? It's not just because he's gifted. That there is part of that athleticism. I get that, but it's also because he spends his mornings hitting over 100 different balls into the driving range, one after the other, just to practice. Then he spends hours and hours and hours a day playing different types of courses and playing on different fairways and through different hazards like the water hazards and the sand traps and all that, hours and hours a day. So you're not going to get good at anything like that, like on the scale of somebody like Tiger Woods or Yanni, unless you spend hours a day doing whatever it is that you want to get good at. You're not
Exactly.
going to just naturally become Superman at whatever it is you want to do. You have to put in the time. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. I don't know if you wanted.
That is so true. So, that, like I said, you could go back and I think that what Thor was just talking about is in our podcast where we were mentioning a gift versus talent.
Mhm.
So if you go back to that podcast,
Or gift versus practice.
yeah,
Yeah.
gift versus practice, you'll be able to hear a little bit more on that and more on Yanni.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anyways.
Oh, I just had an idea. What do
Yes,
we
an
have?
idea.
What do we have? Sorry,
What?
have him as a guest speaker.
That would
Yeah,
be
that's
cool.
easy to do,
You're
right?
gonna have to set that one up. I
Sure, I
got
can do it.
Nolan on. You get
Oh, okay, sounds good. Yeah,
you get Yanni on.
yeah.
But anyway, so we have those practice tips. And of course, presentation. I always tell my students you practice the way you perform. So it's
Mm.
really good to practice good technique at the piano, and good posture and good form, because that plays a role in your performance. You don't realize that when you do not practice those key things, that when you perform, you're basically you're kind of giving your audience an idea of that. Like I tell my students, it's like, I don't care what I'm doing. So basically you're telling the audience that they don't need to care about what you're doing at the piano. And it's like an attitude. What you give out there will come back to you, so you
Mhm.
need to make sure that you're feeding your audience a positive message when you're performing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's all about showmanship, and the more you do that, I think the better you'll get at it. It's like anything else. You practice performing. There's a whole other dimension to it. And I want to mention another thing too, because we still have, believe it or not, we still have 5 minutes
Oh, I have
or
another
10 minutes. We
another
can do 10 more minutes. We can go to 8:05 if you want. Because what did you
just
want?
go on.
Well, I wanted to talk about nerves
Yeah, go
because
for it.
so this is the thing. This is one of the big obstacles that some people run into, and that's getting nervous on stage. And I am, like I said, of all people, I get super nervous on stage. I get stage fright. And I don't know if it's because I started performing kind of late in my life. I didn't start, like I played the violin like in a recital when I was 8 or 9, but I was so scatterbrained and oblivious. I didn't even hardly realize there was an audience. I was like, just
He didn't even have any crushes in the audience. That's why.
any
Crushes.
oh, crushes. I thought you said questions. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of crushes when I was 8. I mean, back then girls were icky, You
Yeah,
remember
that's
that
true.
stage, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I get nervous. So I don't know if that's just because I'm jaded or, I have my own issues about acceptance. It could be psychological, but here are some tips that I'm going to give you, ironically, because who am I to give tips? But here are just some that people have given me that have really helped. Okay. And then you can add to this if you
Yes.
want. Um, so as far as nerves, yeah, so muscle memory is your secret weapon. So again, I know I'm reiterating this, but if you get nervous, your muscle memory will carry you through. So the more you have it in your muscle memory, that muscle memory is a very formidable opponent to your nerves. So you might be nervous, but it'll be so automatically ingrained in your muscles that it'll just happen, and that's what you want. So just practice, practice, practice. When you when you perform, what you have to do is also is tell yourself to slow down. Keep reminding yourself that because your nerves will make you play faster and the tempo will be way too high, just like we talked about, and that's very common. um, and another thing is like when you practice, just like Missy was saying, is practice the way you can perform. So you can kind of, I know this sounds weird, but you need to kind of daydream and pretend like there's an audience there. Kind of close your eyes and imagine yourself like on the stage and pretend there's 100 people watching.
Mhm.
How are you going to act? Are you going to like scratch your head and like sniff and cough and like sneeze? No, you're going to like be very poised, pretend there's people watching you, and take a deep breath and just relax and just have fun. Um, and so that's kind of what I do. I know that's kind of a weird way of, thinking of it, but that really helps and that really preps you for when you actually do the performance, and then you know what to expect so that you're not like, oh, they're all watching me. Um, so, but yeah, I get nervous, but it's gotten better. The last few performances I've done before the whole COVID lockdown, I did very well in terms of not being nervous. And again, this was like before the last performance, actual performance I did was back in February because that was before the lockdown with COVID-19. So, um, and I've gotten less and less nervous as I've performed, and now I haven't been able to do it in a while because of COVID. But yeah, it really helps.
He'll
And
get back out there.
I'll get back. Yeah, yeah, eventually. And well, I've done the what do you call it? The virtual lessons, and
Yes.
that's a whole different thing because you have a camera pointed at you instead
Yeah,
of an audience. So
that's true.
you're looking at the camera, going like, "There's 300 people in that camera watching me," right?
Yeah,
That's a whole
it's a
different thing.
little bit of pressure. It's a different kind of pressure
It's a
though.
different kind of nervousness, and but I'm telling you, muscle memory, relaxing, reminding yourself to slow down, and also what I do. I heard this from somebody on YouTube. I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody that was like a classical pianist that had been performing for a long time. It's actually if you go into the performance on stage during a concert and you keep pressuring yourself to play perfectly, when you do make a mistake, you'll get flustered because you'll go, "Oh my god, I made a mistake," and then you'll make more mistakes. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So what I've done the past few times is actually like anticipate a few mistakes. Kind of tell yourself, "Oh yeah, I'll probably make 2 or 3 little fumbles that most people won't notice, but it's fine." When you tell yourself that, ironically, you make fewer mistakes because you're more relaxed and you're not as like tensed up. And I tried that and it worked like marvelously because within 5 minutes I was so relaxed the whole rest of the concert I wasn't nervous at all.
And
So
I always tell my students, and this kind of goes back to that artist, I think it's Bob Ross. If you're going to make a mistake on the piano, make it a happy one. So I always tell my students, if you're going to make a mistake, make it a good one. There have been situations and times where I've played and I've performed, and I mean, you will not ask one person, maybe except for my dear friend Glenna, who knew the music. But if it's especially not a song that people are extremely familiar with, you can usually get away with a mistake without people even knowing. So I always tell my students, kind of like Thor said, play through the piece. If you make a mistake, it's okay. because in some cases, no one knows the song but you and I because they've
Hmm.
never heard the song before and they don't know the sheet music.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake, unless it's like really um, out of line, you know,
Hmm.
and the more experience you get, you'll find Thor too is that we can usually cover up our mistakes really nicely.
Yeah, and you get better at doing that too.
Oh yeah,
You
you
just
do.
act like nothing happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's all in your facial expressions too. So you have to practice not giving it away. I tell my students when you make a mistake, don't go "Ugh,"
Yeah, like, oh
or
no.
like yeah, you just kind of keep a poker face
Yep.
when you're
Mhm.
playing through the song and with a smile, and then
Yeah.
everything's okay. Because you also want to exude grace when
Hmm.
you're performing too, and it's all how you uh, put yourself out there. And like I said, is what you give is what you're going to get back. So you always want to perform very graciously when you're performing. But here's one little quick tip, and
Yeah,
then
go
we
for
can
it. Hmm.
too is your diet is huge. Before you're performing, I do not recommend going out and getting like 3 shots of espresso or anything like that because
You just ruined my day.
caffeine will affect your performance. So, if you're try to limit your caffeine intake, you don't want to have a huge headache either if you're used to having caffeine, but you don't want to have a ton of caffeine before you practice. Make sure you drink lots of water because that's good for your brain. And also, protein is very good for your brain too. And then maybe some fruit for some sugar. But, you don't want to have a bunch of like candy or anything like that either because that'll put you on a huge sugar high. So, and then you'll have then you'll drop. So it's always good to have kind of be well balanced um uh health wise before you're going to perform, and make sure you get plenty of sleep the night before.
Yeah, and actually walnuts are good brain food too.
Yes,
Nuts are good for your
almonds
yeah,
and salmon is excellent.
yeah.
If you can have salmon the night before your performance, I highly recommend it if you're not allergic to it, of course.
You should be like a you know how we had that music therapist on
Yes.
here? You should be like a music nutritionist.
We'll
Wouldn't that be so
have to make that up.
Yeah. Hey, there's a first time for everything, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, and you always want to give yourself enough time to prepare. So that means like maybe if you have like a little routine before you're going to perform, allow yourself plenty of time so you're not rushed either. Because if
Mhm.
you're rushed, that might set your nerves off a little bit more because you're anxious about,
Yeah.
running late.
Yeah. I mean, just relax, you know.
Exactly.
Just remember to relax, take a deep breath. Remember, like you could tell yourself, well, it's not a big deal. I mean, it is, but it just don't make it so that it's like a big deal in a bad way. If it's gonna be a big deal, make it a big deal in a good way, like you're excited, you know.
Yes. And most of all, just be happy
Mm.
and just enjoy the moment because the times that we do get to share our musical talents, gifts, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't happen, I think, often enough. So when you do, try to be in the moment and just enjoy it.
Yeah, and remember that if you make a mistake playing, whether it's a piano or any other instrument, the world is not going to blow up.
Yes.
I don't know if you knew that. The world will not come to an end.
Yes.
Most people will not notice. Most people will not remember. They are not going to be focusing on that one little fumble because they're going to listen to the rest of it, especially the end. And so they're going to really be going like so afterwards when they stand around, they're not going to be going like, "Well, Melissa played a great rendition of Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto." But do you remember like 3 minutes in, she made that one little mistake where she played a C sharp instead of a C? They're not gonna say that.
Yeah.
They're gonna be like, "That was awesome." They're not gonna be focusing on that one little fumble. So so again, poker face. If you make a mistake, act like nothing happened,
Yeah.
and most of them won't even notice, especially if you're in a recital because
Yeah.
if you're in a recital, the parents don't play piano.
Yeah. And you just
They work for a living and
yeah,
they do other stuff.
and remember to execute a convincing ending.
Mm.
That was like one of the main points that a music mentor pointed out to me was to have a convincing ending. So if you have a convincing ending, like I said, all is forgiven. If you mess up on the
Yeah.
ending, like I said, you have to try to maintain your emotions and be as gracious as you can, um, and stand up and take your bow. but try not to, have a sour face or anything like that, because really, that is noticed. And if like I said, if you can exude some grace in your performance, it really does go a long way.
Yeah, and there's oh boy, it's like 8:05, but I'm gonna mention a couple things. Actually, just one thing, but it has two things in it.
Yeah,
Um,
hurry
hurry up.
up.
I'll talk really fast with the caffeine I've had. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's kind of there's two ways you can be performing. You could either be playing your own music, like what I do a lot, or you can be playing what
Sheet
most
music.
yeah, sheet
Yeah.
music, like just covers. And now if I play my own songs and I mess up, guess what? I act like it's part of the song. What are they gonna say? That's not what you wrote, you know? So if I mess up during my own compositions, I act like I just, well, this is how I've written it now. I changed it last night. They don't know. So it's very easy to put on a poker face when you play your own song. So that's actually pretty easy to pull off, unless it's just like stark, like very obvious that it's not part of the song. So remember to put on a poker face. I put that as a hashtag today on the announcement I did earlier on Facebook. That's what that means. It's poker face. You act like nothing happened. You just keep going. You don't stop. Um, if you're playing a cover, like especially a popular one, like you're playing "For Elise" by Beethoven, which is a very popular song.
Mhm.
If you mess up on that, do the same thing. Act like nothing happened. Like seriously, just act because even if they know that it was technically a mistake or they have like a hunch, who cares? Keep playing. The worst thing you can do is stop and like gasp and be like, "Oh shoot, I made a mistake." That's the worst thing you can do. Just keep playing, and they won't even remember. Especially if you do the ending well, like she said, is
Yes.
they'll just be like, "Well, that was pretty darn good." I mean, most people make like a little fumble or two, unless you're touring with the Boston Symphony Orchestra and you're a famous classical pianist, which you're not. And if you
But
and
you're not.
and if you are and you're watching this, what are you doing? Go like practice with the
But
orchestra, you
but
know.
can I just add one thing then?
Absolutely.
Okay, so real quick, and this kind of has to do with what Thor just said, is this. I always tell my piano students, because I've had girls in the past, especially, I don't know what this obsession with for Elise. I had one year where I had six girls that all wanted to play the same song. I tell them, when you're picking a piece, you got to think about what you're deciding to play for your audience members, because I tell them picking those popular pieces comes with more responsibility, because if you're playing a song
Oh,
that
yeah.
people are more familiar with, if you make a mistake, everybody's going to
Yeah,
notice.
yeah.
As opposed, if you pick a song that everybody is not familiar with,
That's a good point.
they you will be able, well, more likely to get away with a mistake or two.
Mhm.
So remember, when you are a piano student or a student of any instrument and you want to play a popular piece, remember that comes with more responsibility. You will have to, and I think you should put as much practice in one song as the other, but you will have to make sure that you have the time to put aside to practice that particular piece, because it will need extra practice.
Well, and having a backup plan too, because you know what you could do too is like have a kind of a contingency so that if you do mess up, you could be like, I'm going to do this, this, and that. So, for example, in For Elise, be like, okay, this is a popular song, so I'm really going to try to nail it because it's a big responsibility, like you said.
Mhm.
But if I mess up in measure 12, that's a contingency. I'll just skip to measure 13. Like have a pre-planned thing where you say, okay, I'm going to do this if I mess up,
Yeah,
and
but
have a
that
backup. You
yeah,
know.
but that's the thing too. Your audience members are more than likely going to hear and know that you made a mistake.
Mhm.
So you really have to think twice about choosing those pieces when you want to perform. I know they're a lot of fun, they're familiar, and they are crowd pleasers, but with those songs also comes with more responsibility.
Just write your own song. That's what I do.
There you go.
When I mess up, I'm like,
And
"Oh,
it's not
really?
to
I messed up?
and
How do
it's
you know?"
not to discourage you from not choosing those songs, but you have to, like I said, just be very mindful and put more time aside to practice those
Yeah,
pieces.
well, For Elise is a good stepping stone into other songs. So
It
I
is.
even if you don't perform it, you know, it's still a great piece to learn just to like as a springboard into the other, you
Oh
know.
yeah, I think it's, and then Moonlight Sonata. I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many other ones.
yeah.
But anyways,
Anyway,
we're
I think
running
we're
out of
done. Yeah, I
time.
think we're done. Well, thank you and
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Thor.
And
Thank you.
we will be here next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but I'm sure we'll decide
We will
between
let you
we'll
know.
let you
We'll let
know.
you
Yeah.
know. But please subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear from you. Please comment
Mhm.
or private message us, but we would love to hear from you guys, and maybe throwing some ideas our way on topics that Thor and I
Yeah.
can cover in the show.
I was just thinking that you can suggest topics, but they have to
Absolutely.
be music related. So if you say talk about
Yes.
penguins, we're not going to do that. So so make sure and stay safe,
Yes.
and we'll see you next week, same time at the same place. So
Okay,
bye
great.
bye.
Thank you.
I almost tripped.